So, welcome to our second webinar in our series, How to Bill $1 Million. The purpose of this series is to provide recruiters with valuable insights into the US recruitment industry. I'm joined by a panel of experts discussing growth markets and the skills and traits of the top billing recruiters across the USA. You may remember the last time we were in Miami talking all things life sciences recruitment. Will was there with me. And today we jump across to New York City, where I'm delighted to be joined by Stewart Cherry and Will Pendleton. So guys, would you like to just introduce yourself? Stu, do you want to kick off and introduce yourself and Oliver James?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Lisa, and well, good to see you as well. Name's Stewart Cherry, Managing Director for Oliver James in the US. I've been in New York now for, I think it's over 8.5 years. I've been over here and overseeing operations in New York and sort of building out the business here. So yeah, great to be here.
Excellent, thank you. And Will, do you want to recap on who you are?
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm Will. I'm not based in glamorous New York. I'm in Liverpool. So to toss up two news in a better location, I think, Stu, I think most people will agree on my side if we have to side on that. But in terms of that, what I do is I work for a company called PGC, so Precision Global Consulting. We are primarily here to basically provide really early on expansion advice to recruitment firms who are looking to get into the US market. And then really once they're started there, what we do is we support them to build and scale a compliant contract book across the US and Canada, and have been doing so for the last 20 years. So alongside that, we basically pick up lots of tips and tricks along the way from the likes of Stu and the amazing guys at Oliver James and lots of other firms as well that we've got the privilege of working with, and trying to share them with recruiters, as well as then providing them with a solution to actually, like we said, scale that contract book in the US.
Amazing, thank you. And just a quick reminder, if you have a question for Stu or Will, just pop it into the Q&A and we will answer it as we go along on this session. It's all anonymous. We can't see you, but we can see your questions. So yeah, we'd like it to be as interactive as possible. So do participate and let us know your questions. So just to kick off, Will, would you mind giving us a quick recap of the facts and figures of the US and New York recruitment landscape in general?
Absolutely. So I'll just share some slides with you guys now. So hopefully you should be able to see these. And first of all, we always just start off by looking at the US in general. So we probably did this on the last one, Lisa, but I always think it's really interesting to just have a look at the figures again. So when you look at the projections for this year, for what the markets are supposed to do, these are recruitment revenue numbers from different industries. You can see there quite clearly that the US is coming in at the top with $216 billion projected to be generated from the US recruitment industry as a whole. Obviously, that's number one by a long shot. You can see there, followed by Japan with just under 100 billion, and then the UK following up with 57.6 billion. So when you compare the US and the UK specifically, what you end up with is, you know, a market that's completely different. So you've got 34% of that global market share of that $650 billion that we just looked at there belongs to the US. And you've got 8% in the UK as well. So these are the 2022 figures that came out from last year. So again, you can see the US market is over 4 times bigger than the UK market. But the mad thing really about that is the saturation difference in the recruitment industry. So you've got less agencies in the US going after that huge market share than you do in the UK. And so really that drives the value and the demand for recruitment through the roof. It doesn't make it any easier. We all know it's a really, really hard job, but you are a lot more well rewarded for the hard efforts that you are putting in. And so that's why you're seeing so many firms starting, if not, you know, kind of really scaling up their US efforts, because you've got fantastic recruiters in the UK used to really, really competitive markets and, you know, fighting over that with, you know, so many different agencies, where you can go over to the US and, you know, kind of absolutely kind of do fantastically well really, really quickly. And I'm sure Stu's going to share later some tips that he would advise for people wanting to do that as well. But that's the reason that so many firms are looking over to the US. New York City in particular, obviously, that's the first place that everybody thinks of when they think of America. It's the gateway to America. You've got Ellis Island, you've got one of the most connected cities in terms of airports and transportation links for the whole US. And so obviously by default it is kind of where everybody thinks of first of all. So when you look at it and why so many firms, not even in recruitment, but just in general, look at the US. If New York State was one economy, it was a city, the economy of New York State would be the 10th biggest economy in the world. So, it's bigger than most European countries on its own, which is crazy because it's one of 50 states. After California and Texas, it's the third biggest economy in the US. So interestingly, Texas has recently kind of surpassed New York in terms of total revenue from the economy side of things. And the thing that I think blows my mind is that the New York City recruitment market on its own generates more revenue than the entire Australian market, than the entire Irish market, than the entire Emirati market as well. So, it's absolutely enormous. And a big driver of that is the fact that you've got close to 9 million people all based in one tiny area, over 3 million of whom have got a degree. So you've got a really highly educated workforce. And obviously it's a massive melting pot for a massive group of talent. But also when you think about the businesses that are based there as well, you can see there over 51 of the Fortune 500 companies are HQ'd in New York. They cover all manner of different industries. Alongside that as well, even if you've got one business that, because they're so large, they might just focus on one specific industry, but within that they have massive need in all different areas and sectors. So it's a fantastic market to kind of be focused on. And like we said last year, it was our third best state, and again after California and Texas, for contractors being placed there. The market that generated $7.6 billion in revenue, not PGC. That would be lovely. But instead it was that's the New York contract recruitment market last year generated $7.6 billion in revenue. So it is a fantastic, really robust market. Obviously last time, Lisa, we looked at life sciences. This time we're going to obviously spin it more towards a more New York focused type industry, which is financial services and insurance. The reason being is one of the largest employing industries. Most of those firms that we talked about that are based there are kind of these types of firms that work in these industries. It currently employs about 8% of New York City's workforce. So that those 9 million people, over 8% of them are kind of involved in this industry. A fact that I found out doing this before when I was doing some research was, for every 1,000 people in New York, 13 of them will be accountants. So you've got a chance of bumping into what's that, like 1.3% of people you bump into will be an accountant. And even though it's 8% of the employment, it generates 20% of the city's gross domestic product. So it's a massive driver of the economy over there. And you can see, when you look at the size of the amount of candidates within that specific market, you can see why, just in one city, you've got a population in one industry that's bigger than the entire population of some states and some kind of cities. So, it's absolutely incredible place to be if that's the market. And really, if you are thinking this market, it is the first port of call because of everything we've mentioned, because of Wall Street, because of all the other items that you've got going along that as well. One of the things that we looked at as well is obviously with contract placements, while your clients might be in New York, the talent might not necessarily need to be there. And so what we found is that a lot of remote work has been brought on for kind of contract work in specifics. These are some of the revenue figures from SIA from last year of the contract revenues generated by the financial services and insurance sectors. And these are the top 10 states that you can see. So you can see that New York, people based in New York, still generate about $300 million worth of revenue from contract placements. And you can see some of the other markets that you can kind of focus on there. Again, really strong as always on the East Coast for these markets. There's lots of hubs there. And so by being based in New York, you can kind of look at some markets not too far away and really expand the talent pool that you're placing into your clients. And I know Stu is going to obviously talk a lot more about this and have a lot more insight into the salaries and the different roles that him and the team place over in New York. But one of the drivers of the reason that a lot of people look at New York is because of the high salaries. And what drives the high salaries, unfortunately for people living there, is the high cost of living. So one of the things that we looked at before is the cost of living index. Is if you assume that of 100, the number 100 is the national average for cost of living in the US. In New York, it's obviously the highest at 168.8. And housing specifically is 50% more on average than it is across the continental US as well. So why do 9 million people live there? The reason being, you are obviously paid a lot more to actually work in that city to be able to afford to live there as well. So these are some of the salaries that we mentioned before. And what we've done here is just taken 5 kind of general roles that you would see in these industries, the national average for them and the New York City average. And I'm sure these are very conservative estimates as well. You'll typically find that a lot of the roles that you'll be placing will be a lot higher than that. Also, a lot of the time you're billing on total compensation packages as well, not just the salary. But this is information that's come from the Bureau of Labour Statistics from census data. But you can see, even using conservative wage estimates, you're looking at, an average of the high 20% of an increased salary. And obviously, if you're billing a percentage margin on top of that, if you put a 25% margin on 140 grand salary, you're looking at a 35K in billings. If you do that, you do 2 placements a month, you're very close to hitting that $1 million biller target that we're talking about today. So, they're some of the drivers of the US economy, of the New York specific economy as well. And then hopefully some insights into why it is that, Stu and so many other firms are in New York and looking at these markets as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Will. That's really, really helpful to have that sort of macro view. So if anyone has any questions on any of those slides that Will has put up, do let us know and pop it in the chat and we'll come back to it. But I'm just going to go over to Stu now, talk a little bit about your journey and like, obviously we know we've been told now what the size of the market is now in New York. What about, 8.5, 9 years ago when you were thinking of moving? Why did you decide to move to New York?
I think I would have moved a lot quicker if Will had provided me that data. So, Will, where were you in 2015? It's a really good insight there from Will, and obviously we've been partnering with PGC now since the inception of Oliver James in the US, and they've been a great partner for us, throughout that journey. I think ultimately the reason for me to move to the US and New York in particular was, I suppose, 3 major things. One, the opportunity was presented to me. And if you've come across Ollie or Jimmy within our business, they're pretty persuasive. But, the opportunity that was there to do something exciting. I've been in Manchester for 8 years at that point, and it was quite an exciting prospect to come out here. I think the other aspect was financially, of course, there's a massive incentive, and even back then, we knew what the opportunity was when you were comparing the average fees in the US to the UK. Even with the higher cost of living, it still makes financial sense to come out and to give this a go and to be $1 million biller. X, Y, and Z. That was a huge incentive, and I think 3, the other aspect was just the life experience of being here. Being in New York, working in New York, living in New York, that's very, very hard to turn down. As beautiful as Liverpool is, I'm sure, well, your arm could be twisted if the opportunity presented itself. But I think that for me ultimately is what it is about. I was very invested in the company, and when the opportunity presented itself, it made a huge amount of professional sense to jump on it.
Okay, great. And you obviously came out as a biller and a manager, and you've grown a business. How big is your team now?
So I think we came out with 5 of us, and we're about 115, 120 now. Amazing.
It's amazing growth. And what would you say, like, the markets you're in for people sitting in the UK thinking, where should I go? Should I do life sciences? Should I do financial services? Should I do tech? Why would you think that they should choose the markets that you're in?
It's a really good question, and it's a difficult one because I've never worked in life sciences. I did have a very brief venturing into the oil and gas market, and as timing goes, I entered the oil and gas market when you needed, I think the price of oil needed to be about $150 a barrel, and I think by the time I exited, it dropped to about $45 a barrel. So I'm probably not an expert on the oil and gas market, but I think the reality is with financial services and insurance, that is what Oliver James have always specialized in. That is the area that we focus on. We're one of, if not the largest, almost insurance specific and financial service specific search firm globally. There's a few others, of course, but that is our bread and butter, and it has been for years. We've diversified slightly over the years, but certainly in our operations in New York, that is what we drive. Even our operations in Charlotte, for instance, focus on insurance as well, health insurance. So that's just what we've done. And it's a really good question, Lisa. Why have we done it? It's almost, that's just what we've done. I feel that there's a huge degree of scalability in it. I think that it's a very interesting market. To me, it balances the idea of volume accounts, big organizations. Some of the amount of people that some of these organizations employ is incredible. But I think they offer value as well. And I think when you're looking at a desk and a commercial strategy where you want to take your business, I think you've got to view those things and take those into account. Can you get the volume of business? Can you get the value of business? And I feel that with the FS market broadly, obviously we've developed now more, not just within insurance, which was always our go-to. We've now ventured more into asset management, hedge funds, banking, which have been additions to our business over the past couple of years. Again, not easy, as Will alluded to. They are, they're tough nuts to crack. But I think once you're in them, there's so much opportunity to build out your business, be that tech-focused roles or maybe more professional service, non-tech roles, and that's what we've done. But it's a really good question. Why? It's maybe I've just not asked that question enough.
I think a lot of the time people look at financial services, especially in the UK, and think, oh, it's quite commoditized. It's everyone's taking their recruitment in-house, like the big banks, and notoriously, obviously, HSBC sort of going in-house. Like, do you see that in the US market in terms of the competition with in-house recruiters?
I think everyone thinks this is a really good idea because they feel that, the idea is that, oh, sure, we'll give recruiters an extra. And in the US, it is real. Don't get me wrong. Like some of the money they're trying to pay in-house recruiters is vast because they know that they're spending so much on it. But like, invariably, they're going to have smaller in-house teams than what maybe an agency can provide, and it's people power. It's hours that you can put into it, and you're just not going to have the reach with in-house teams as you are going to with agencies. And as I say, it's all well and good. Barclays or HSBC, as an example, putting up ads on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, we're recruiting X, Y, and Z." How many people genuinely look at them? How many people are going to be interested in them? So yeah, look, it's always, and there's some very, very good people that have gone into it. It's always a threat. It is always some form of competition. But I mean, I don't lose sleep over that, I'll be honest.
No, that's great. Okay, cool. We've actually got a question in our chat for you, Stu. For somebody who's historically worked in a UK or European market and they want to shift to the US, how hard is that transition? And do you have any tips that you would give to someone making that change? Because I know you've relocated a lot of people in your own business from Australia, from London. What do you think the transition challenges are?
It's a really good question, and I suppose you would want to dissect that a bit. What markets are they working in now? How different is that going to be? Is it a candidate short market? Is it a job short market? I think there are variables that you need to take into consideration when you're doing that. My honest view, and this sounds maybe a bit flippant, I would always suggest to someone not to overthink it, in the sense that there's going to be differences no matter what you do. I started my career at Michael Page doing marketing and communications recruitment for consumer companies in the northwest of England, and then moved into working with public sector. So I was working on, PR managers, that may be getting 25K, 30K at Wigan County Council. I mean, as glamorous as that, no disrespect against Wigan County Council, but, to then moving down and working with some of the biggest insurance firms in the world doing actuarial contract, I didn't overthink it. And as you know yourself, well, from the Northwest, working in a Northwest market to then working, say, London markets, it's very, very different. And I dare say that's as different as working a market in the UK or Europe to transitioning over here. But ultimately, what is it? You're trying to ascertain what a client needs and wants. You build those relationships. You find out what the candidate pool is, and then and you just do your stuff to make those connections and partnerships. So it's a really good question. But my honest view is that if you are successful in the UK and European market, and you've got a really good strategy in how you've built relationships, how you've maintained those relationships, go back and look at the stats that Will has provided. You know, the US market is 4 times that of the UK. Fees are probably at least double. Contract fees are nearly triple. So again, if you're doing okay to well in the UK, you could do good to great in the US, and that's I say that when I speak to candidates all the time.
Do you see a long ramp up time for people relocating? It's quite a big thing, you know, shifting your life over to a new country. And what do you typically see is that sort of ramp up time?
I think that depends on how much you're enjoying living in New York. I think that's always one of the challenges. You know, when you come over, like, it is an incredible city to live in. I've been here for 8 years, and it really is. It is nonstop. It's so fun to be here, and it does. Despite the greyness of my beard, apparently it keeps you young here. I'm not on jury's out on that one, but I think the ramp up time is very interesting because it is so subjective. You know, it really is down to the individual. I think typically speaking, you know, I think anybody that expects to come into any market and see big financial success within the first 12 months, you're probably slightly delusional. You know, you probably need to be thinking about this as a 24-month process to get yourself up and running. Now, don't get me wrong, we've had people come in, you know, experienced people, say, from UK or Australia, and in 12 months, they are making really good inroads into the market. I feel that is so subjective. Within Oliver James, we have got hundreds of clients that we work with. There's hundreds of warm clients, terms of businesses, points of entry into organizations. So people aren't coming into cold desks. So there's great ramp up periods. They're brilliant people to learn and work off. But ultimately, and I mean this genuinely, it is down to the individual, how quickly they apply themselves.
You mentioned, there's a question here as well, you mentioned the importance of building those relationships with your clients and your candidates.
Yep.
What would you say, what's your strategy for building those relationships and with, because I feel I've relocated a lot of people and they said it's actually quite different. It's quite a transactional market. So it's quite hard to maybe get, you know, unusually maybe get a meeting with your client until you've actually delivered, you know, a candidate or whatever it might be. So it's slightly different to the UK. How would you say people coming across should build those relationships?
I'd studied here for a year when I was younger. I studied in the Midwest for a year when I was younger. And I came over, and again, I'm not trying to sound flippant, I thought just maybe an accent alone would open doors for you. You know, we were like, you know, I'm just going to just have the Irish charm here and just go for it. You're absolutely right. It does take a while. I think there's a degree of cynicism over here because they've heard it all before. You know, how you think about it, how many calls are hiring managers getting, you know, on a daily basis or a weekly basis? It's excessive. And I feel it's funny, we were talking about this in a training session yesterday in work, and people naturally want to go after these big companies, you know, but these whales take time, you know, and I feel that, you know, you've got to find any angle that you can build a relationship with individuals. There's conferences, there's meetups, but you have to go very much out of your way. You have to be the one that's proactive, because I tell you one thing, in New York, people don't go out of their way when they're walking on the street, let alone go out of their way to give you business. So you really have to be very inventive. I think you have to be very tenacious. I think you have to be very persistent, but you also have to be able to deliver, because we've caught up with clients. We've done post-placement meetings and audits and service updates and all these different things. And we're always trying to ascertain, what is it that clients want? Why do people want to work with you? And I would say 60, 70% of the time, 70% of the time, it comes down to, are you delivering good candidates for them? Are you delivering a good service for them? That is what it is down to. You want to become best mates with some of these clients, which should be your objective. Deliver, and that is it. And it's a really, really good question. How do you do it? You're right. There is a transactional element to it. I think also that it does take time, but it's that persistence with it, and ultimately the delivery of it. But I think once you have, and sorry, just to step back, I think you have to recognize the relationships that you want to invest in, and that's massively important. It is building those relationships with clients as candidates. That is building those relationships with the people you think are going to be up and comers, early on. Bit of a gamble on that, granted, but those are the things you really need to do. And as I say, it does take time, but you really, if you feel there's a good relationship there, really latch onto it and build onto it, because the reality, and I'm sure we'll come to this, to be $1 million biller, you do not need 30, 40, 50 relationships. You don't. You really, really don't. You need 5 to 10 that you've nurtured and you've built. But it's just being shrewd and commercial to work out, well, who are those 5 or 10 that I need.
Yeah, well, that leads us nicely on to the subject matter of the day, which is how to be $1 million biller. So obviously in your team, you've got multi-million dollar billers and a range of $1 million billers. So can you, obviously it's hard in a nutshell to generalize, but what would you say are the key traits of those billers in New York in your business?
So we've got $1 million billers. I think we were looking at this at the end of August, and we're just doing sort of a 12-month recap. And we've had $1 million billers on, I think, every desk, every division that we have in our business. We have them across perm and contract. We've had them on higher value desks, and then those also on higher volume desks. We've had them where people have been 360 focused, and we've had it where people have been maybe primarily client side with some delivery. So we've had it right across the spectrum, Lisa, in that regard. There are definitely some traits that I have seen that just that will continue throughout. And I think people, first and foremost, who are focused, they've got that, not necessarily the goal in mind that they want to do $1 million. It's that they've just, they want to be their best in their industry, and almost $1 billion becomes a byproduct of what they're doing. I tend to think and again, people operate differently. Some people say, right, like I had a guy last year who wanted to build £1 million. That's what he wanted to do. So the fact that he built $1 million, that was just part of the journey where he wanted to get to. So whatever the driver is, you've got to be a very goal-driven, orientated person. I think people will talk about work ethic. That's absolutely it's also to me, I don't even think you should really debate that. That shouldn't even be a discussion point. You've just got to work your ass off to get it. But a couple of the traits I have found in people that I find very exciting from a business perspective, when you're trying to scale and you're trying to instill good habits and people who lead by example, is people who've just invested in their desk and they've got a genuine interest in what they're doing. You can be $1 million in any industry. Anything that you do, you can do $1 million. I fundamentally believe that. And I don't think, financial services and insurance, of course, that's what we do. I've seen it across tech, across accountancy, across actuarial, across UBC. I've seen it across all those areas. But obviously, you've massive billers in other forms of tech and big pharma, life sciences, legal. There's all those things that come into it. But I genuinely believe you're not going to be $1 million biller unless you've got good relationships. I don't think you've got good relationships unless you have got a fundamental knowledge and interest in what you're working, and you're authentic in how you come across, because ultimately it doesn't necessarily matter if it's Oliver James's name on on the tin, or Faden, or Michael Page, or anybody else. It is about the individual that is delivering. So I think that interest plays such a key role, because you will feel that and see that in the conversations you have with candidates, the conversations you're having with clients, the events that you're attending, the information, this really great commercial market information that you're sharing. That's what it's about. So if you don't have fundamental interest in what you're doing, you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely. I think that passion and interest, and I think Adam Matthews, when we were in Miami, was talking about it, being a master of your market is one of the things that he brought out, which I think is really, really important. And like you say, the work ethic, I think Adam talked about overachieving, always overachieving. Like, you have KPIs, but the $1 million billers are always doing that little bit more. And I think that's similar to what you were talking about.
I think they're constantly pushing themselves as well. So they're overachieving because they're constantly moving their bar upwards. That's the big thing. And I feel that when if you've got groups of individuals that are $1 million billers, it's in a way, it's creating that internal competition with them, so that they are bringing the best out of one another. But I feel that's important, that you shouldn't be sitting still. And the people who've built $1 million, they're constantly thinking, right, well, how do I beat that? What do I need to do better in that regard? But the work ethic cannot be understated, Lisa, and the sheer volume of work you need to do it. If you're doing, say, $1 million at, say, 30K fees, we do roughly 30 to 40K fees. You're looking at at least 30 deals a year, which is 2.5 deals a month. And you think about it, even the best recruiters in the world are not filling every job that they work. They might fill every second or third job that they work. So you think about the sheer volume of jobs they're bringing on, and then the quality of the jobs they're bringing on. That's where it comes into. That's where, for me, the work ethic is really demonstrated. Yeah.
I think the other thing we talked about before is we see is like, what value are you giving to your clients and your candidates as well. I think that's something that, in terms of getting the quality jobs on, it's like, you're going to get them if you're that partner to your clients, rather than transactional.
But that goes back to the relationships that you're having.
Passion. Yeah.
Because if you've got those relationships, then you're going to get the quality of jobs. If you're obviously we talk about mastery, you want to, as you say, to Adam talked about mastering your market. But again, it's, what is the caliber of your qualifications? What is the caliber of the service that you're offering? And again, those things, ultimately it comes back to the relationships that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we've got a question from someone which is really interesting. What traits do you see that UK trained recruiters have that maybe domestic talent doesn't, that would set them up for success to bill $1 million? Basically, what's the difference between a UK recruiter and an American recruiter?
I think that's very, very difficult to answer, in the sense that, I try not to fall into sort of caricatures of individuals, because I think it's, you could talk about what's the difference between someone who's 30 to 20, or, 40 to 30. There's different traits with everybody.
Do you find they're trained differently?
I think that Adam, that Will talked about it and put the nail on the head. You are coming from the UK. If you are well trained, you are invariably going to be working in pretty competitive markets. Therefore, your processes need to be really, really sharp, and invariably will be scrutinized a lot of the time, because you might be beaten out by someone who's better, because the competition is so fierce. And I feel that coming from that environment, that really intense environment, is a massive plus factor for UK trained recruiters. I remember reading something, this is maybe go back 3 or 4 years ago. It said that recruitment is worth, like, was it between 6 and 8% of the UK's GDP? So the UK do produce and develop and nurture recruiters better than any other country in the world, by the nature of what they do. It's just the environment with which they work in. So I don't necessarily think it's about the individual. I think it's the environment with which they come from enables them to maybe take advantage of markets over here, which aren't maybe as mature, which aren't as developed, which aren't as fiercely competitive in just sheer numbers. They are competitive, absolutely. They are developed, but not to the extent that you're maybe dealing with in the UK. So for me, it's maybe the nurturing rather than the nature.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think
I was just going to say, Stu, as well, I just add into that, I once heard somebody describe recruitment as the UK's greatest current export. You know, it is what we do better than anyone else because of, like you said, you've got such a competitive atmosphere that you've been raised in, you've been birthed in it. It's like what's that, like Batman thing, like you merely adopted the darkness I was born in it. It's like, you know, you are like, you've been raised to really, you know, be a hardcore recruiter. If you're well trained and you've stuck with it and you've kind of stayed the course, and it's those same traits that will make you successful in the States as well. You know, I was speaking to another recruitment leader a few months ago, and he was saying that someone who bills 250, 300k in the UK should easily do 500-600k in the US, not because of there's something that's magical about the US, but because that person's going to take the same work ethic, the same, you know, mastery that we've all been talking about. There's no differences in the way that you recruit in it. It's still recruitment. It's still the same things that will make you successful. But being in a mile deep and demonstrating to those clients when you get through to them that I can deliver. Here's how I've delivered in the past. I know your market. I understand what you need more. And then the value, like you said before, is kind of what then carries you to that next step. But it's the same job. It's the same talents that are going to get you the success in the US that they will do in the UK.
Yeah, and you didn't see the light till you were nearly a man, I think is the end of that quote. Well, from Bain. So, but you're absolutely right, and I think it's a brilliant point. It's just the sheer opportunity that is here with the businesses that you can come into, and the scalability of it. That is something that the US can offer that the UK cannot. And I honestly, I generally, from a professional standpoint, I don't know why someone in the UK wouldn't want to take the opportunity to come out and work here. I really don't. You know, it's, you know, the UK's had like everybody a challenging time over the last number of years. Of course it has, but the growth opportunities that are out here are extraordinary, and I really do feel that it's such a brilliant opportunity to come and to hone your skills and take yourself to that next level. And that's the thing that excited me, you know, nearly a decade ago. And I think those factors are even more true now than they were back then.
Yeah. I think just going back onto that training, like how have UK recruiters been trained? One of the, and I'm getting a few questions about how do you know, what are the training methods that we should be giving our consultants to take them to that next level? You know, how do you take a 500k biller into $1 million biller, and what are the training? But I'll ask that question in a minute. But one of the things that we've discussed on previous webinar was having control and process, like having that down to a key. And I think, you know, every conversation has to lead to something. So every call has to, you know, you have to get leads, you have to, you know, doing the basics, but having control and process, we see leads to you know, increased billings basically. You know, so that sounds obvious because that's just the recruitment process, but I think it is really important that you have that in your training kit. Basically, how do you control, how do you qualify, you know, from anything from qualifying to closing, and what you're getting out of each single call. And don't, you know, if you put the phone down and you've forgotten to get a referral, pick the phone up again and do it, you know, call them back immediately. So it's those small things that will actually translate you from a 500k biller to $1 million biller.
Being brilliant at basics is absolutely essential. And I do not think you need to overcomplicate a lot of what you do, but you're absolutely right. It's commercializing every conversation. You know, you can build brilliant relationships with people that you might only talk about work, you know, 15, 20% of the phone call, but that's when you're at the level that you can do that. I think until that point, you know, it's adding value in every conversation that you're having. You know, there's that give and take. If you are, you know, if you have that aspiration to be a subject matter expert, and I personally believe you cannot be $1 million biller until you get to the point where you're a subject matter expert. Okay, you might get lucky along the way, but typically speaking, I think you need to be able to demonstrate that, because you're having to convince a whole bunch of people to listen to what you're saying. But I think you're absolutely right. They said that understanding of the basics, it's been able to do really good qualification calls. It's really good for, be it client, be it candidate, be it job. Okay, and it's managing the basics throughout job processes. The amount of times, and one thing you will find here in the States, and again, a point you raised, how do you get from $500,000 to $1 million? Counter offers, for instance, are rife here at the moment. Okay, it's a big problem. That, out of anything, is probably one of the biggest competitions to people doing deals right now. It's the threat of those counters. But again, I was taught this in my first week in recruitment, 15 years ago. It's how are you managing against that? What questions are you asking? And I feel fundamentally what holds people back from being as successful as they, not just as they could be, as probably as that they should be, is they are still not asking those difficult, awkward questions that they don't necessarily want to hear the answer to. And I think you have to get yourself, cliche, but be comfortable being uncomfortable. But you have to do it. And I feel getting that mastery, getting that being brilliant at those basics and the fundamentals of what recruitment is about.
Yeah.
Be equipped with that. And I honestly, if you're in the right desk, in the right company, with the right culture, with the right leaders, you can thrive over here. I really believe that, because I've seen that happen. But I think you need to be very conscious of your own skill set that you have. To get from $500,000 to $1 million, a couple of things I would just be looking at very, very quickly. What's the quality of your work like? Okay, obviously you really do need to dig into that. And also, what's the quantity of your work like? Is someone who, compare yourself to $1 million biller, are they doing half as much as you? Sorry, twice as much as you. Are you doing half as much as them? We did this exercise last year. We had $1 million and $500,000. $500,000 said to me, Stu, I want to do $1 million. This is great. Let's look at your activity on the same desk compared to $1 million biller. Half the amount of leads, half the amount of relationships, half the amount of activity. I said, well, it's pretty simple here. This person is maybe doubly motivated than you are. Other times it's the quality piece, but that was I remember that conversation very clearly. It was very illuminating in terms of what you had to do.
Do you think quality would only come with experience, or do you think
No? I don't. I mean, you look at it in any walk of life. Lionel Messi was brilliant at 17 years old. He didn't wait till he was 30 to be brilliant. I think some people will just get it and some people don't. However, I think the other side is that those people can be few and far between. I think that your standing in the market can take time. I think your relationships take time. I think you can naturally just get things. But I think to benefit truly from that, I think you do need to go through the ups and downs in that. And I think one of the problems you have, the thing I love about recruitment is that you can make more money than so many other industries, like the majority of other industries, without any other qualifications or any qualifications. That's the beautiful thing about our industry, and I love it to pieces. However, I think people also come into it with this short-term view that recruitment is only a 5 to 10 year career. And if you come into it with that mindset, in my opinion, you probably don't deserve success.
No.
Why? Why should you be earning in 2 years what is taking other people maybe 5? Just because you want it? It doesn't work that way. So I think that's that balance, Lisa. I think people are just naturally talented and get it. But I think to get the true rewards from it, of course, it takes time.
You have to stick at it. Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple last questions, and then we'll wrap it up. And I appreciate everybody's busy, but any differences do you see between contract and perm? If somebody's sitting there, should I be doing contract market or a perm market? Again, it depends. Yeah. What would you suggest?
I think that is down to, again, the mindset and the mentality of an individual, because to excel in contract, that is a marathon, not a sprint, because the market, and we'll have probably more figures on this than I will, but the contract market in the States, if you can get into a market that is contract, it is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And it will take you probably the guts of 18 months, 2 years to really see that come through. But my God, if you're in that and invest in it and see the course, it is so profitable for you. You know, we have people doing $2 million on contract billing here. And I'm not talking about split with someone else in their name on the board, $2 million. Okay. Multiple people doing that. But it takes time. You know, it takes time to build those relationships, to find out those companies that do it, to find the candidates that do it. But again, if you want short-term success, I mean, not even short-term success, you can be successful on any desk, but I think it does take a certain mentality to do contract, as opposed to, I think, you know, a contract recruiter can do permanent. I don't necessarily believe a permanent recruiter can do contract, but that's just
experience.
yeah.
Well, no,
I always refer to contract in the US. It's like lighting a firework. It's like you've got no idea how long that fuse is, and like if you can stick with it and just keep going, keep doing all the right stuff that we've been talking about today, you just keep building through that. All of a sudden, it just takes off, and then you're off. Like it is like a gold mine. It's just you've just got to kind of keep plugging along. It is not an overnight thing at all. You know, it does kind of just keep chugging along and then just fly off eventually. But
that is resilience, though. Well, to your point, it's resilience and curiosity, because to be good at contract, you've got to find out who is hiring contractors. You've got to find out where the projects are. You've got to find out where the opportunities to get these things are. Then you might have to convince a panel of people to go contracting. You got to find where these niches are, where are the problems for clients. And that to me takes a level of curiosity and tenacity, which is, you know, when it pays off, it's exceptional.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, that is really, really helpful. I don't think unless there's any other questions, which I don't think there are, we'll end it there. But Stu, just one last question actually before we go. What would be the one biggest piece of advice you would give to somebody who's thinking of relocating to New York?
Call Oliver James. Okay, that's the biggest piece of advice when you're going. I know. I
Call
think
15 West.
15 West, people call Oliver James. Exactly.
Yeah,
Sorry. You're right. Absolutely. And look, I think the biggest thing is to understand why you want to come here, because I think, and I would genuinely say this to anybody, if you are thinking about it because you think to yourself, you want to have faster career growth, you want to have sustained financial rewards that come with that, I think you can have something that's way more scalable than that in the UK. And I feel like just financially, it's way more lucrative for you. Those are the facts, okay? And again, there's more and more companies pumping money into the US, trying to grow it out. Oliver James are the same. We have 3 offices now across the States. We're going to keep growing and growing these. However, one thing I would say to everyone, I would really encourage you, especially if you're in the likes of UK, Ireland, Europe, etc., just if you've never been and you want to come, just jump on a flight, check it out, get an idea for it, because it's a place like no other in New York. But I think it's good to come in with your eyes wide open. I think that's a big advantage. But if you want to take your career to that next level, it just makes total sense. And as I say, we'll have the stats to prove it. So
amazing. Well, listen, thank you. That's super helpful. Loads of insights there, and I'm really appreciative of your time. And Will, thank you so much for all the facts and figures. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.